the Holy Family. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. The Holy Family, or also can be called the suffering family. The suffering family, but also the faithful family. An unexpected pregnancy. The shame and the ridicule, persecution that they received when Joseph brought Mary into her home. The rejection from family. They were an immigrant family. They had to migrate. A place that was not their own when Mary was soon to be with child. I think of Joseph in this moment. They're in a place that's not their own. This is not their home. They're a poor family. They're an immigrant family. And now comes time for Mary to have her child. And Joseph, the father, the husband, the provider of the family, looks for a place where Jesus could be born. And to think that he'd have to go back to Mary and say, all I could have and we could have is a stable. I couldn't get anything else. Think that the very manger that they would put Jesus in, it was actually a feeding trough, not the most ideal place to put a baby. Definitely, I'm sure Mary and Joseph, this was not their dream or their desire to place Jesus in a feeding trough. Soon after, they had to flee because Jesus was being hunted to be killed. And they had to flee. Mary was a widow. Jesus experienced the death of his own foster father and the pain and the heartache of losing the one that he loved. I think of this closeness between Jesus and Mary. And as Jesus enters into his public ministry, the signs and the wonders, Jesus is getting more popular. It's a lot harder to get into the presence of Jesus, and what that must have been like then for Mary and Jesus, where it was much harder. There was this separation where Mary had to begin to let her son go as he was moving into the mission that his father called him to. The pain it would be. And then at the foot of the cross, Mary watching her own son suffer. The agony. As Jesus experiences the complete abandonment of the Father upon the cross, and he screams out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I think Mary, I can see Mary in the midst of her own heart as she's watching this. She's watching her son cry out to the Father. I can just hear Mary in her heart utter this prayer. "Father, I don't understand you, but I will trust you." I'm sure there were a lot of things in the Holy Family's life that it did not look the way in which they thought it was going to look. I'm sure within the yes that Mary and Joseph gave, and the yes they continually gave every day to be faithful to the Lord, it did not turn out to a certain extent of how they thought it was going to be, and the dreams of what it was going to be like, and the heartache they would have to endure and bear. I'm sure there are these times of confusion. It didn't make sense. They didn't understand. And yet, Father, I don't understand what you were doing, but I will trust you. They were a faithful family. They suffered, but they were faithful to the Lord. I'm sure many of you, I'm sure there have been times in your life where you look at where you're at, and it might not be exactly where you thought you'd be. There might be particular sufferings and difficulties in your life that you were not prepared for, or you do not understand. Or you may look in the midst of your relationship with the Lord and you're like, I thought it was going to be different. That's honest. That's real. But it's amazing, in the midst of the yes of Mary and Joseph and of Jesus as well, you see, we forget that Jesus also said yes. I mean, Jesus didn't always get what he wanted. We may think he did, but he didn't. I mean, Jesus in the garden was like, Father, please let this cup pass. Please take it away. Is there any other way that we can do this? That salvation can come forth into the world? Is there any other way? No, my son, there is not. 3 times he asks, take it away. All right, fine, Father, not my will. Your will be done. I will trust you, Father. And this yes that Jesus gives, this yes that Mary gives, this yes that Joseph gives, you see, this yes was like seeds that were planted in the Father's heart that in time began to bear a harvest and a fruit that we get to eat of now. The yes that Mary made thousands of years ago, the yes that Joseph made, the yes that Jesus made, to be faithful to the Father when they didn't fully understand and how it was going to go and the pain and the suffering, their fidelity to the Lord offered us a fruit of salvation that we have in this moment, the ability to experience new life, forgiveness of sins, to have hope when there does not seem to be hope. And you know what? Sometimes the yes that you give to Jesus, you might not fully see the abundance of the harvest in your lifetime. Joseph didn't. Joseph didn't get to see his son. Signs and wonders and miracles. He didn't see the resurrection. He wasn't able to be there to comfort his wife as his son was dying. But Joseph was faithful. He didn't see it in his life, but his yes bore fruit in that time and in the generations to come. But see, when you give a yes to the Lord, when we're obedient, when we trust the Lord, when it doesn't make sense, the Lord takes that seed and he waters it and he waters it and he begins to produce a fruit, not just in your life, but in generations to come. Mom, dads, I'm telling you right now, there are things in your life, there are sufferings and difficulties that have happened, that may happen, and when you give your yes, you are tilling a soil for your children and your children's children to bear a fruit that you may not see. That your suffering, your difficulty, the yes that you may give to Jesus, when it doesn't make sense, is never in vain and is never wasted. You know, there may be people here where you may be the only one in your family that believes in Jesus. You may be a grandparent or a parent who you've seen your kids leave the faith, walk away from Jesus. You may be a widow or a widower. You may experience that heartache. There could be illness and suffering. You may feel like you have been on the cross for years and years and years. It doesn't always make sense. And how can God make sense to us? He's so far above us. His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. But he's good. And he loves us. And it's in this time when we don't understand, that's where faith, my brothers and sisters, begins to operate. You see, faith is not something where if you can see it, it's not faith. If you have it, it's not faith. Faith is this gift that God gives for us to have confidence in who God is and what God has said when we don't see it, when it doesn't make sense, when it's dark. Faith operates in the darkness most of the time. Faith looks upon the difficulty that faces us, and it's like, I don't understand what you're doing, Father, but I will trust you. We don't need understanding to follow Jesus. That's not necessary. Faith is necessary. If you want to understand it all, you won't follow Jesus. But if we give him a yes every day, if we're honest with the Lord, and that's a beautiful part about the reality of our faith, of the honesty that we can have of, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't get it. I want to quit. It's really hard. I thought it would be somewhere different. You see, the Lord sees things in our lives in ways that you cannot see. His perspective, his knowledge is much different. There may be things that you don't understand, but the Lord's like, will you please trust me? There are things 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, generations to come that if you say yes to me, will bear a fruit and a harvest in their life, that you will rejoice. That one day in heaven, in our fidelity, because that's the whole point. Faith, the goal of our faith is salvation, the unending crown of glory in heaven, that sometimes the yes that you have given to Jesus, it might not be fully released on earth until you are in heaven. You might not fully rejoice here on earth of your yes, but you will one day in heaven, and you will be grateful of the yes you made here. He has a perspective that's far greater than ours. He doesn't ask for our understanding. He doesn't ask for us to get it. He's like, will you just follow? Will you just trust me? I don't get it either. Trust me, this was not my thought of, I was here for 6 weeks and then I had an injury and I was gone for 4.5 months. Made no sense. And the first Sunday back, I'd be in a wheelchair, not moving and bouncing around, and I don't understand. But I will follow him. I will trust him. Because I also know that in my ability to say yes to Jesus, I pray that it bears a fruit in your life. That there's seeds that can be planted by my yes, that one day God can release in your life. That you can be more faithful to him. That you can experience his love. I recognize that the suffering and that which I might not understand has value in the name of Jesus. That he is working something in my life, but in your life as well. And he is not asking me personally as his priest to understand. He is just asking, will you follow me, my son? Will you trust me? Will you trust me? My brothers and sisters, as we move into this new year, may this radical trust be a new part of your life. A particular prayer of saying, Father, I don't understand you, but I will trust you. And this is one of the main reasons why we're here. Because faith is hard, and it cannot be lived without Jesus. Just as Mary and Joseph, the center of their family was Jesus, so too must Jesus be the center of our own lives. And in the pain and the difficulty and the honesty of faith, we need to be fed by Jesus. Of not only being here to worship the Lord because he's the Lord, but to be fed by his body and blood, to give us the grace to say yes to him when it doesn't make sense, to be faithful to him when it's extremely difficult, when we've been on the cross and we want to get off, to receive his body and his blood, to sit at his feet and to receive his strength and his love. So that in the darkness, in the difficulty, we'll give our yes to the Lord as Mary, Joseph, and Jesus did. They were a suffering family, but they were the faithful family. They might not have always understood, but they always followed. My brothers and sisters, may we have the prayer on our lips, as did they at times. Father, I don't understand you, but I will trust you. Amen.